Hey everybody, Alex here, and welcome to the first of what I guess is going to be a three-part series, or hopefully, as I go through the Cold Steel games. So, if this is your first rodeo with this sort of thing, I don't really, I guess you could say, review things when I do like these little discussion pieces. It's kind of just like how I felt or how I feel having finished it. Was it good? What did I like? What did I not like? What themes to identify? What things were powerful? And at the same time, hopefully, no spoilers. This used to be known as The Job, and basically it was just me rambling, but kind of with this whole reimagining, I want to make it more about an emotional response or just like a thematic thing, and definitely focus on that, even to the point where I took notes, and I don't take notes for nothing typically when it comes to these things. So first game that I'm doing this with really is going to be Trails of Cold Steel 2, and I say it's going to be part of what I hope to be a three-part series because I intend to finish the quadrilogy this year. I had finished Cold Steel 1 roughly a year and a half-ish, 2 years ago, and coming into Cold Steel 2, I was at a little bit of a disadvantage because while I remembered most things that happened, certain instances, certain circumstances, certain characters I knew by face but not by context. And going through the game, I was kind of like, you know what? Let's just end it. Let's just finish it. So, finish Cold Steel 2, finish Cold Steel 1, and now we're moving into the second half of the series. But for Cold Steel 2, it picks up right where Cold Steel 1 left off, like literally a month later. Reen basically just comes to and is like, what the fuck happened here? And then it just goes from there. But the interesting thing that I really enjoyed probably the most about this game, and they kind of did this with Trails in the Sky second chapter, is other than a little bit of a tutorial thing, it doesn't really go out of its way to give you like a whole information recap dump at the beginning of the game. It'll flash some flashback sort of sequences. You maybe get a little bit of like a voiceover thing or just images. There is a sort of recap synopsis that you can select from the main screen. I didn't read it because I thought I would remember everything, and I was sorely mistaken. Just the way the game picks up, it starts off kind of like the way Cold Steel 1 did, where it's a little bit of a humble beginning for Reen, the main character, Reen Schwarzer, and then it kind of just builds up into something that's out of this world. And for risk of spoilers, Reen has one goal in his mind that is continuing from Cold Steel 1, and that is ultimately his driving force that pushes him forward throughout this entire game. But the interesting thing with that is Reen's personality is very addictive. He has this sort of charisma that is humble yet confident that I've seen countless times in RPGs before. But I think just coming from him and probably the way the voice actor does it, I just tend to listen when he talks. And I believe him. He's a very likable character. There's even one instance in this game somewhere towards the end where they try to put him in a negative light, but I personally just couldn't believe it. I'm like, there is no way this is Reen. Like, something happened. And of course, they don't tell you shit because they want you to play the next handful of games, because that's what these trails of games tend to do. They all take place in the same universe. And that's probably the biggest thing that I have against this game is while it sort of assumes you played Cold Steel 1, it also kind of assumes that you played the Crossbell games. It kind of assumes that you've played the Trails in the Sky games. Is it debilitating? No. Because I've only played all three of Trails in the Sky. And admittedly, first chapter is way better than the second chapter, in my opinion. But with Crossbell, those never came out over here. There's fan translations. There's any which way you can play them via PSP. I think somebody did a Vita version. I don't know how competent that is. And there is also a PC translation of the first part. And that's all well and good and great, but it's really annoying when in a game that I've really enjoyed, like Cold Steel 2, kind of just goes, oh yeah, all that stuff in Crossbell. And then just continues talking like nothing happened. I would love to think that XC probably was in the process of translating these games in one way, shape, or form until they lost the contract. For those of you who don't know, XC doesn't really handle as many, if any, of Falcom's games anymore. Now it's gone to NIS, particularly for the Trails of Cold Steel games and Ease. And I am unfamiliar with the translations or the localization work of NIS with these games, other than Ease 8. That didn't bother me, but the way that the tonality, 2 games deep into a series, as well as not the spin-offs, but as well as the Trails in the Sky games, I'm a little nervous going into Trails of Cold Steel 3, because it's not the same team that's been doing this. Do I imagine that they're going to try their damnedest to keep it as close as possible? Yeah, but it's kind of like when an author passes away, and, like Tolkien, I think it's his grandson who finished his last book. Robert Jordan passed away, and some of his closest colleagues in the industry finished his last book, which I can't remember the name, but everybody said you can kind of tell where one ends and the next one begins. The tonality changes, so that's something I'm really afraid of, because the tonality in this game, even during the most negative times, was overly positive. Even when I was thinking, like, this isn't Reen, I was confidently thinking, something is going on here. This isn't who he is. And then after that particular scene is over, he reverts right back to himself, and he kind of just like exhales. And that's just something that I loved throughout this game, because there's a lot of that. And Reen's main goal, for those of you who played this game, or finished it rather, even when he is literally this close to grasping that goal, you can't help but notice he's not angry. He's hopeful. And even one of the main antagonists of this game, him and Reen have a relationship where they just talk to each other. It's almost a rivalry, kind of, but not really. And it's basically like the two of them are just in a competition the entire game. Almost to the point where, and I'm trying to be vague here so I don't spoil it, where it's just like, oh yeah, try me. And then the game goes on, and then, one of them will be like, huh, well, okay, you got me. But can you do this? And then it just keeps going. And it's one of those things where when you finally reach that climax of this rivalry, you're excited, you're stoked. You're just like, in the grand scheme of RPGdom, you hopefully you know who's going to win. But at the same time, it's still impactful and emotional. It's not cheesy. And that camaraderie spreads throughout the entire game. At one point, again, for risk of spoiling, there's a little bit of Gurren Lagann going on here. For those of you who played this game, you could probably put 2 and 2 together with a crew. And I couldn't help but love it. It reminded me of Gurren Lagann. It reminded me of Suikoden. All these things, because each of the characters in this particular 2 games, even the supporting cast is strong and likable. Even like the annoying upperclassmen, as cliched and anime style as they are likable. And it's really cool to see them again, even though I didn't remember who half of them were, which is why I'm like, okay, maybe I should really go through these games and get the total story and just be done with it. But that doesn't really change the fact that when you see them, you're like, oh, I forgot about him. Oh, I forgot about her, and all these other things. The link system and all that stuff is still here. It does feel kind of aggravating to have to restart-ish, I guess you could say, in your combo links, because I maxed out my preferred team in the first game. And while it does carry over stats and a bunch of, items and a bunch of other stuff, you still have to kind of restart a little bit. It basically, the game starts you at like level 75 or something like that. And I finished at like 142, 144. Because I did, not every side quest, but the battles are so much fun. And that is also because of turbo mode, because again, I will say this again, I do not know how you people played this game without turbo mode. Everything moves so slow. But turbo mode really makes it fun, makes it snappy, particularly on the PS5. It does allow you to get back into the story really quickly. And this particular edition, the Relentless edition, which is, I decided to name this, I guess you could say, series after this game, because one of the characters in the game says something with the words relentless, and I'm not going to go through the whole sentence. To me, it was very powerful, and it triggered an emotional response out of me. But I don't want to say it because it's a spoiler. But when I heard that particular phrase, it got me. I was like, oh no, no, no! Like, how can this game end like this? And it doesn't end. It goes on for another 30 hours. But that's besides the point. But it meant so much, and it was like I understood why this was called the Relentless Edition. It was the guys at Xseed knew exactly how important this particular phrase would be, and thus, relentlessly moving forward is going to be the name of this series, and that's just how we're going to do it. But again, it all ties into camaraderie, and even with this, it's like this particular sentence isn't targeted at just Reen or the player. It's targeted at the entirety of Class 7. And it's a friendship that I don't want to say, I have some amazing friends, and a bunch of my friends are still my friends from grammar school and high school, which is ridiculous because some of you are probably going, that's ridiculous. I lost touch with all those people. And I'll be honest with you, in the year 2020, now 2021, it's a little bit more difficult to see people like that. But a game like this, while I will admit, put a sense of longing into me for this personal connection, which we can't experience as of this recording. It gave me a sense of hope. Mind you, I'm like triple the age of these kids, but it made me remember all that stuff in high school that I really liked. It made me remember like all the stuff I didn't like. Same thing happened the first game. That's why I tend to like high school anime style JRPGs like Persona and whatnot, because it allows me to remember probably some of the more fun times of my life when it came to games and just experiencing friends. Once you get a job in there, it just gets more complicated and challenging. And the game even hints at that, because at one point Reen kind of has to go away for a bit, and when he comes back, it's just like it's like he has free time, and he's like, I don't know what to do. Honestly, that's an invitation for the player to spend their time. But from a storytelling perspective, that's something I can relate with, where come the weekend, I sometimes just sit on the couch and I go, what am I going to do? And then I spend 5 hours trying to figure out what to do, because I now have time to myself. And I think that's really where this game really excels. It kind of abandoned the whole school thing in terms of the scheduling, and it really put you in a perspective where you are able to do what you want to do at any particular time. Even the quests, the side quests, it's not done through the old system where Toa would leave an envelope in your mailbox where you kind of get your to-do list for the day. You kind of just select these missions or tasks from a computer, and then you either do them, don't do them, or you just go about your way, and you're free to explore as much of the map as the game allows you to. There's a bunch of optional world bosses and all these other things. It's really more so about taking your time and using it for yourself, and that's something you don't realize until the end of the game, where Reen no longer is able to do that. And it's kind of like a growing up thing, because ultimately that is the point of this story. It's about Class 7 growing up. And seeing that camaraderie all the way through the game, and you love every single one of these characters to get to the end. And even after the epilogue chapter, which I'll admit was a little long in the tooth and kind of pointless, a little bit, you can't help but be sad. You can't help but be sad just knowing like such a good group of friends are going to grow up and go through the things that I have gone through, or maybe you have gone through, where your friendships, as important as much as you cherish them, aren't going to be the same. And it's not because you as people change, it's because life changes. And I think that's really the best part about this game. Yeah, it's a JRPG. Yeah, it's a little bit fantastical. Yeah, there's big bad things and evil schools, not evil schools, evil monsters living in schools and armies and warfare. Real issues with fantasy issues, but they still lead to something that I feel everybody kind of experiences in life. That's growing up and knowing and valuing the friendships and the time you get to experience with these people because it doesn't last forever, because you're always relentlessly moving forward. Anyway, I've been Alex, and I'll see you on the next one. Take it easy.